Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere cold, stone-built, and unforgiving. A land where bedtime didn't mean lullabies and cuddles, but possibly sleeping on reeds with bruises from training. You're not in your room anymore. You're in ancient Sparta. And if you thought childhood was rough in modern times, well, let's just say you probably wouldn't survive this one. No video games, no snack breaks, and absolutely no whining. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you, so drop that in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born into the world with a first breath that barely echoes off the cold stone walls of your mother's home. No royal welcome, no fuzzy blankets. Just the faint sound of sandals pacing outside. The murmurs of neighbors wondering if you'll pass the test. Not a metaphorical test, mind you. A real, literal inspection. The elders of the tribe come to see you, and they're not there to coo or pinch your cheeks. Their job is to decide, do you look strong enough to grow into a soldier of Sparta? Or are you, by their standards, too weak to be worth the effort? They say it's done gently, that the baby is examined for visible deformities, for cries that sound feeble, for limbs that don't move with enough vigor. But in practice, what this means is that the judgment of a few stern men could decide whether you're raised or abandoned. And abandoned doesn't mean someone else might adopt you. It means being left outside, on a cliff, exposed to the elements. Mount Taygetus, specifically. A place known less for its view and more for its role as an ancient wastebasket for the unfit. Historians still argue whether this practice was as widespread or rigid as the sources suggest. Some believe it was more symbolic, a threat used to keep families in line. Others insist the Spartan Council of Elders genuinely discarded newborns like defective tools. What's certain is that the belief alone was powerful enough to shape Spartan society into one that worshipped strength and feared even the appearance of weakness. You, in this moment, are judged to be strong. Congratulations. Or condolences, depending on how much you enjoy harsh discipline and emotionally distant mentors. Your mother will raise you for a few short years, during which you're wrapped tightly, fed efficiently, and not coddled in the least. Spartan parenting manuals, if they existed, would probably read, feed, wipe, do not hug. It's not that they don't love you. It's that in Sparta, love must never get in the way of duty. Affection is like dessert, rare and earned. Your father is likely not around much. He lives in the military barracks until retirement age. You might glimpse him during public festivals, or in passing as he trains with his unit. Family in Sparta is a flexible concept. The state is your true parent, and it has very specific ideas about who you're supposed to become. At around age 3, you're already expected to walk without stumbling and speak without whining. You learn to sit in silence, to make eye contact, and to eat whatever's put in front of you. No tantrums. No, I don't like this. You can cry. Once. After that, you're taught to swallow tears the way others swallow soup. And then there are the stories. Around the hearth, you hear tales of heroes like Leonidas, of battles won through sacrifice and silence. Your earliest lullabies are war songs. Your dreams don't feature dragons or fairies, but noble deaths and posthumous glory. Even the way people look at you is different. not as a child to protect, but as a potential soldier to mold. There's a quirky detail here too. Spartan babies, if they pass the inspection, are often bathed in wine instead of water. Why? The belief was that weak babies couldn't handle the sting and would cry uncontrollably or fall ill. It was a form of resilience test disguised as hygiene. Whether that actually toughened up the infants or just made them smell like a bad symposium is still up for debate. You don't get toys, not real ones. Maybe a carved stick, maybe some pebbles, but nothing soft, nothing indulgent, nothing that might distract you from your future purpose, to serve Sparta. Your world is utilitarian. No colors for decoration, no pets unless they serve a function, no songs unless they are chanted in unison with others. Everything is stripped to the essentials, and yet it's not all grim. You feel a kind of pride even now, this expectation that you'll grow into something strong and necessary. There's comfort in structure, in knowing your place. You hear how other cities spoil their children, let them run wild, fill their heads with poetry and daydreams. In Sparta, you are already becoming part of something greater. One last historical curiosity. Spartan infants are sometimes said to have been taught not to fear the dark. Lamps were used rarely, and night was simply part of life. Crying at night? Weakness. Asking for someone to stay with you? Weakness. In some houses, it's said that silence after sunset was absolute, except for the breathing of future warriors and the creak of wooden beams. Whether true or exaggerated, the message was clear. Comfort is not your birthright. Discipline is. So you lie there in your swaddled blanket, perhaps wine-scented, breathing the cold air of early childhood. Your cries were short. Your inspection was passed. Your training has not yet begun, but the city is already shaping you. And you, lucky you, are still alive. You are 7 now. That number feels bigger than it should. Because today, you are no longer a child of your household. Today, you become property of the state. There's no ceremony, no gentle transition. One day, you're at home, still half sprawled in your mother's arms. And the next, a soldier comes for you. Not rudely, not cruelly, but firmly. He says you are ready, and that's that. Your mother has known this moment would come. She has kept her tears hidden, like any respectable Spartan woman would. But her hand lingers on your shoulder, just a little too long, and you notice she doesn't quite meet your eyes. She knows where you're going, and she knows who you will have to become. You don't understand all of it yet, but you will. You'll understand very quickly. You walk beside the soldier, not behind. That's important. Spartan boys must never slouch or shuffle. Your steps are trained even now. Spine straight, eyes forward, emotions stored deep, where no one can reach them. You arrive at the agoge, the infamous military-style education system, where boys are stripped of their softness like bark from a tree. Here, you are sorted into a herd, a small group of boys around your age who will become your brothers, your rivals, your mirrors. There are no personal rooms, no bedding from home, just a communal dormitory with straw mats and linen so rough it might as well be woven from tree bark. The room smells like boys who've been running in the sun, like dust and iron and unwashed linen. And now the rules begin. You will not eat when you're hungry. You will eat when they decide. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not cry, even if the boy beside you pulls your hair or kicks your shin under the table. The instructors don't care who started it. They care who finishes it, and how. You're taught that words are rarely the answer, but fists? Fists. When controlled, speak Spartan fluently. Your hair is cut short. Your name is shouted again and again until it no longer feels like your own. You wear the same garment every day, a single, rough cloak, regardless of weather. No shoes, no blanket, no comfort, only order, discipline, exposure. The cold isn't an accident. It's part of the training. You are learning, whether you know it or not, how to endure. Historians still argue how much of this was literal and how much was propagandized by later writers like Plutarch. Some believe the agoge was exaggerated to build Sparta's mystique. Others argue the harshness was very real and that it worked, at least in building the most feared warriors of the Greek world. Either way, your days now follow a pattern. Wake at dawn, run drills, eat bland porridge, recite war poetry, fight, train, be corrected, be watched, be judged. One quirky detail you discover quickly. You are encouraged to spy on your elders. If you catch an instructor making a mistake, or hear something you're not supposed to hear, you're supposed to report it. Loyalty to the state trumps all other bonds. Even your loyalty to your immediate superiors. Even, perhaps, the budding loyalties to your new herd. Trust becomes a luxury you cannot afford. That doesn't mean friendships don't happen. They do. But they are quiet, coded things. A glance during mealtime, a shared scrap of stolen food, a hand that reaches out to steady you after a blow. Your instructors don't yell often. That would imply they're invested. Instead, they correct with silence, with narrowed eyes, with the back of a hand if needed. Praise is rare, but when it comes, usually a nod, a single word. It feels like thunder. You'll crave it more than bread. There are no toys, but there are contests. Wrestling, foot races, endurance trials, pain thresholds. Everything is competition, and everything is monitored. You start to feel it, this sense that you are never alone, even in your own head. You sleep beside other boys, hear their breathing, their nightmares, their murmured dreams. Privacy is gone. Privacy is weakness. Privacy is for Athenians. You do get stories, though. Not bedtime ones. Stories of heroes who died before 30. Of brothers who leapt into spear lines to save their comrades. Of boys who smiled while being beaten just to prove they could. One night, a teacher tells you of a Spartan boy who stole a fox cub and hid it under his cloak. When caught, he smiled and denied everything, even as the cub gnawed his belly open. He died before he confessed. You ask why he didn't just drop the fox. The answer is swift. Because Spartans don't get caught. And if they do, they die with dignity. That's your bedtime lesson. There's one rare kindness: music. You are taught choral chants, martial songs, rhythm drills. Spartan music isn't flowery. It's driving, drum-heavy, meant to unify breath and beat and blood. You learn to march to it, breathe to it, sleep with it echoing in your skull. Sometimes, you catch yourself humming the tunes while you train. You don't even realize you're doing it. And the food. Well, food deserves its own disappointment. One bowl a day, usually barley or some unspeakable mess of lentils and pig's blood. Yes, that's not a joke. Spartan black broth is infamous. You try to gulp it without tasting it. You fail. You gag. And the instructor watches, not to help, to see how long it takes before you stop flinching. By the end of your first week, you've stopped crying. Not because you're braver, but because you understand now. No one will come for you. No one will comfort you. This is not punishment. This is the program. You fall asleep to the sounds of creaking straw, and boys shifting in their sleep. Someone snores, someone whimpers, and then silence. Spartan silence. You don't choose your brothers here. They are chosen for you, assigned, like armor or a sleeping mat. The other boys in your agoge cohort arrive in waves, some wide-eyed, some already hardened by older siblings who warned them. You notice quickly, no one smiles, not in the way kids usually do. The air between you all is tense, like the beginning of a storm that hasn't decided who it's going to hit first. You are now part of a herd, a unit of Spartan boys roughly your age. And while the word might sound cozy, don't be fooled. This isn't a team in the modern sense. It's more like a pack, where everyone is being watched to see who's weak, who's strong, and who can be replaced. You train together, fight together, sleep side by side. You are expected to form bonds, but you're also expected to outperform one another. Every friendship is a rivalry with politeness layered on top, until the test comes. And there's always a test. In your herd, there's the loud one who tries to lead, the silent one who's already mastered a blank stare, the jokester who cracks dry remarks just to avoid breaking down. And then there's you, unsure which mask to wear, so you just pick silence and hope it makes you invisible. It won't. Nothing stays invisible in Sparta. You're all given nicknames by the older boys, not flattering ones, the kind you'll have to grow into or suffer from. Some get called after animals: boar, goat, lizard. One boy is dubbed Whimper on the first night. The name sticks like sap. And then there's the mentor. Each herd is assigned an older teen, usually around 18, called the Aaron. He's part mentor, part enforcer, part brother you don't want to cross. He teaches you your first drills, corrects your stances, hands out punishment with a level of creativity that suggests he's been on the receiving end himself. He has a favorite in your group. You notice it. Everyone notices it. The rest of you try harder, run faster, hit harder, speak less, hoping that someday you'll be noticed too. Not because you crave affection, but because attention means safety. Sort of. Historians still argue about how emotional these relationships were. Some suggest that bonds in the agoge often blurred lines between mentorship and affection in ways modern minds struggle to categorize. Others argue it was all strictly militaristic, intended only to enforce hierarchy and discipline. Either way, it's clear. You are being shaped not just by adults, but by peers and near peers. You are both student and subject. You're assigned a sleeping spot near the coldest part of the dormitory as a kind of test. Will you complain? You don't. But the shivering gives you away. The older boys laugh softly when they hear your teeth chatter. Warmth is for poets, someone mutters. You don't know what it means, but you pretend to agree. Every morning begins with physical inspection. The Iren walks the row. If your cloak isn't folded right, or your hair too long, or your expression too hopeful, he notes it. Correction is often public. Not shouted, but administered through drills, extra punishment runs, or, on bad days, a slap that echoes like dropped stone. These moments forge strange alliances. One boy helps you redo your cloak one morning. Later, you help him win a wrestling match by distracting his opponent with a fake stumble. Your friendship is never spoken of, but it's real in its own Spartan way. You all eat together. One pot, one ladle. One rule: the strong don't serve the weak. If you want food, you fight for it, metaphorically, and sometimes not. There's a boy named Damon who always ends up with an extra scoop. No one knows how. One day, someone confronts him. He doesn't flinch. "Earn it," he says, and goes back to chewing. No one brings it up again. There's a kind of whispered hierarchy among you, forming faster than you thought possible. Who's the fastest? Who can take a beating without blinking? Who always gets caught stealing? Who never does? You measure yourselves not by kindness, but by resilience. A boy cries once during sparring. His name becomes a joke. A week later, he doesn't cry, but he does wince. It's quieter, but the mockery still finds him. You learn to hide pain behind jokes, anger, or indifference. And yes, fights happen. Not just sparring, real fights. Over food, over space, over status. The instructors don't always break them up. Sometimes they watch. Let it play out. There's value, apparently, in watching who backs down, who gets back up. One boy gets a bloody nose, so often he just walks around with a cloth tucked into his cloak like a nose plug. Eventually, the fights lessen. Not because you've all grown peaceful, but because the hierarchy settles. Everyone knows their place. For now, there's a quirky tradition. Each cohort is expected to craft its own chant. A group song you'll shout together during marches or training drills. Yours is off-key, too fast, and full of mispronunciations. But when sung together, it sounds like unity. Like a single creature with many voices. You're not sure you like these boys, but when you chant together, you feel something. Not friendship, exactly. Not loyalty, even. More like momentum. Shared purpose, mutual becoming. And just when you start to feel secure, your Aaron throws a surprise trial. One night, after dinner, he announces that tomorrow will be your honesty day. Each boy must say to the group who they think is the weakest, one by one, in front of everyone. No lying, no mercy. You want to disappear, but you can't. The rule is clear, and worse, everyone must also say what they do if that boy failed them in battle. It's a game, but it's not. It's a test, but the consequences are real. One boy gets named by 3 others. He doesn't speak for days. That night, someone hears him weeping into his cloak. And yet, the next morning, he runs the fastest. Not to win, to prove he won't be named again. That's your herd, your brothers, your enemies. And for the next decade, they'll be all you have. You are always hungry. Not the kind of hunger where you forgot a snack after school. Not the growl in your stomach, glance at the clock type. This is deeper, constant, like a second pulse beneath your ribs. Spartan training doesn't just toughen the body. It keeps it lean, hollow, disciplined. And hunger, you're told, is part of the shaping. If you're too full, you get slow. If you're too comfortable, you grow soft. So your daily portion is barely enough to sustain a sparrow, let alone a boy running drills from dawn to dusk. You get a bowl of porridge, sometimes with a bit of barley or lentils, sometimes just boiled water with a suspicious tint and the occasional uninvited bug. Once a week, if you're lucky, you get melas zomos, the infamous black broth, a concoction of pig's blood, vinegar, and spices that tastes like someone boiled a battlefield. You gulp it down anyway because it's protein, and protein is survival. The instructors don't eat it with you. They don't even watch. This meal isn't for nourishment. It's for discipline. And yet, somehow, you're still expected to grow strong, to fight, to run, to carry logs and throw javelins and sprint in full armor. How? Well, here comes the cruel genius of the Spartan system. You are expected to steal. Not as a crime, as a lesson. You're not told this outright, of course. But everyone knows. If you want more than starvation, you take it. bread, figs, olives, cheese. But if you get caught, the punishment is severe. Not because you stole, because you failed. This is how Sparta raises you. Not just to fight, but to outwit, to adapt, to read situations. The instructors call it survival training. You call it desperate. You learn to time your movements, to mimic the quietest footsteps. You memorize the schedule of the kitchen guards, the creak of certain doors, the one spot behind the olive storage where shadows stay longest. You're not just getting food. You're getting smarter, hungrier, sharper. Historians still debate whether this sanctioned theft was universal or exaggerated by later writers like Xenophon and Plutarch, who admired Sparta from afar. Some believe it was a formalized part of the curriculum. Others say it was more myth than practice. Either way, in your world, it feels real and risky. Your first theft goes poorly. You try to take a small heel of bread from a storage shelf near the barracks. Your fingers slip. A clay jar wobbles, then crashes. Everyone hears it. The instructor arrives, calm but cold. No yelling, just a look. And then the order. 50 lashes. Not with rage, with method. The blows fall in a rhythm, almost ceremonial. You clench your teeth, count them in your head. Try not to scream. You succeed until number 43. After that, memory blurs. The next day, you try again. This time, it's a dried fig. You succeed. You share it with the boy who lent you his cloak when yours was soaked. He nods once. No thanks. Just understanding. Solidarity tastes sweeter than the fig. You start to notice who's best at stealing. One boy, the smallest, can lift an entire loaf without shifting a single shadow. He never brags. That's why he never gets caught. Another boy tries to take cooked meat from a guard's tray. Foolish. He's caught and whipped, not just by the instructor, but by his own cohort, for endangering them all. There's a kind of code now. You steal quietly, share selectively, never boast. If you eat more than you earn, you fall. If you steal selfishly, you're marked. The group keeps track. There's a strange justice here, not imposed from above, but growing sideways from the group's own hunger and pride. And at night, hunger twists your dreams. You imagine banquets, feasts, grapes that never end. You wake up chewing on air. Sometimes, a boy talks in his sleep, mumbling about honey cakes or roasted lamb. No one mocks him. You all understand. And then there's the odd little trick. Chewing olive leaves. Not food, but bitter enough to distract you. One boy claims it kills appetite. Another says it just makes you want to punch something. You try it. He's right. You feel both calmer and angrier, which is very Spartan of you. Eventually, hunger becomes a companion. It sharpens your senses. You notice smells more acutely. Bread baking across the street becomes torture. A fig tree in bloom is like a cruel joke. Your ears tune in to rustling wrappers, the clink of bowls. Even water becomes a kind of meal. You drink it slowly, pretending it's stew. The instructors never comment on your thievery, but they notice. One day, the head trainer walks past you and pauses. Not as skinny as last month, he mutters. No praise, just data. But your chest swells anyway. And then there's the ultimate test. One night, they leave the pantry unlocked. You all see it, smell it. The door slightly ajar. The scent of dried fish and bread wafts out like perfume. It's too easy, too obvious, a trap. You hesitate. The bravest boy steps forward, pauses, then steps back. No one takes it. The next morning, the door is still ajar, but the food is gone. The instructor smiles faintly. Good, you're learning. That's Spartan logic. Hunger is not a problem. Hunger is the point. It keeps you alert, lean, dependent on your instincts, and distrustful of comfort. Your belly grumbles. You press your hand to it and whisper, quiet. That's as close as you'll get to relief. Pain becomes a teacher long before it becomes familiar. You don't remember when it stopped shocking you, only that now it lives with you, like a shadow that never speaks but always follows. In Sparta, pain is not avoided. It's assigned, administered, honored. There's even a word for it that gets thrown around like praise. Ponos, the noble struggle. You are taught early that endurance is not just a virtue. It is your proof of worth. It starts with drills that border on punishment. Barefoot sprints across frozen fields. Not once. Not twice. Again. Again. Until your soles crack and your breath burns. You run through mud, through gravel, through thorny brush. And when your legs collapse, you're told not to rest, but to crawl forward. One instructor says, pain reminds you that you're alive. Another adds, but weakness reminds us to leave you behind. You don't know if they're joking. No one laughs. Then come the contests. Yes, contests. Because what's better than enduring pain? Competing at it. You and the other boys are taken to a dusty square outside the temple of Artemis Orthia, where public contests are held. The goal? Simple. Stand still and take the lash. One by one, boys step forward and are whipped by elders with thick leather straps soaked in oil. The challenge isn't to scream the least, it's to not scream at all. If you cry out, you're pulled aside. If you flinch, you lose. If you fall, you're forgotten. Historians still argue whether these events were ceremonial or truly brutal. Some accounts suggest boys died from blood loss during these games. Others believe the deaths were rare, sensationalized, or symbolic. But standing there now, bareback exposed, hearing the whistle of leather through the air, you don't care what scholars think. You just want to survive the next 10 seconds. Your first time, you don't win. But you don't cry out either. You feel the blood drip. Feel your knees shake. Feel your fingernails digging into your palms to anchor yourself. You focus on a single spot on the wall, something unmoving, something not in pain. That becomes your ritual. Afterward, you're not tended to. No one checks the cuts. No one offers water. Instead, one of the older boys nods at you. That's your reward. Recognition from someone who survived worse. There's also the cold. Spartan winters don't care that you're shirtless and shoeless. You're expected to withstand. You sleep in unheated dorms. Your only protection, a thin cloak you wear year-round. On frost-covered mornings, you're pulled from your mat before the sun rises and made to train with fingers stiff and blue. One boy hides a second cloak under his mat, hoping for warmth. He's caught. They take both. He doesn't eat for 2 days. Still, there are tricks. You learn to rub your limbs hard before drills to wake up the nerves. You learn to tense and release muscles like a second heartbeat to keep the blood moving. Pain is never far, but it becomes less shocking, less personal. Like an old instructor who doesn't like you but won't stop visiting. You also spar. Of course you do. Not with padded gloves or safety rules, with fists. Sometimes with sticks, always without mercy. Bruises become badges. A black eye is as common as a yawn. You stop hiding them. You start comparing them. That one, says a boy, pointing to your shoulder. First punch from Theros. He nods, impressed. That's status. One quirky custom emerges. You start naming your bruises. The one above your knee is the goat, because it came from a wild charge. The one on your rib is Apollo. because it looks like a crescent moon. Humor, even now, finds a way in. Quiet, dry, survival humor. And then there's silence. Sometimes, the instructors watch you in pain and say nothing. That's the worst. Not punishment, but indifference. You start to crave correction, even harsh words. Anything that acknowledges you exist. Pain at least proves you're being noticed. You learn not to wince when walking on sharp stones. You learn to eat with cracked lips. You learn that pain isn't the enemy, it's your daily lesson. Crying, on the other hand, still forbidden. A boy breaks that rule after a particularly brutal sparring session. He sobs not loudly, but enough. The others go still. The instructor kneels beside him. For a moment, you think maybe something kind is about to happen. Instead, the man whispers, "That will be the last tear you ever shed." The boy nods, trembling. And it is. You're told the story again about the boy with the fox cub under his cloak, the one who let it tear through his belly to avoid being caught. It's retold with admiration, as if he were a saint of self-denial. You wonder if it's true. Historians debate it. But here, it might as well be scripture. Pain is no longer random. It is ritual. It's in the whip, the cold, the hunger, the silence. It's in the absence of comfort, in the way you must hide your limp, clench your jaw, laugh at bruises, and never, ever ask for help. And strangely, you start to change. Not just your body, your thoughts. You stop thinking, "This hurts." You start thinking, "I can take it." Privacy. You remember the word vaguely. A soft moment alone, maybe in a quiet corner of your childhood home. But in Sparta, privacy is treated like a dangerous indulgence, like luxury, like betrayal. From the moment you entered the agoge, every part of your day is shared, seen, measured. You sleep in rows, side by side, no walls, no curtains, no whispers that can't be overheard. The smell of sweat, oil, and damp straw is permanent. You know the rhythm of your neighbor's breathing better than your own. You know who grinds their teeth, who kicks in dreams, who mumbles secrets that probably shouldn't be said out loud. There is no changing in private, no bathing behind a curtain. You wash in groups, standing in icy water, scrubbing with coarse sand or stale olive oil. Modesty? That's for Athenians. Here, bodies are not private. They're tools. And everyone's tool is inspected daily. If your posture slouches or your gait wobbles, you're corrected. Not just by instructors, by your peers. "You drag your heels," someone mutters. And just like that, a new shame is born. Even your thoughts are not fully yours. You are required to recite daily lessons, chants, and training commands in unison. Any deviation, any hesitation is met with scrutiny. If your tone is off, your conviction questioned, you're pulled aside and asked to repeat the phrase 100 times. You start to think in rhythms, in mantras, in state-approved logic. The strong must carry the weak, the group before the self. A silent mouth hides a loyal heart. You repeat them until they echo in your dreams. There's a strange kind of surveillance too, not by guards, but by one another. Peer enforcement. Every boy in your cohort is both brother and watchdog. You are encouraged to report misbehavior, even the smallest rule breaking. Someone sneaks a second bowl of stew? Report it. Someone cries during drills? Report it. You don't want to, but you know what happens if you stay silent and someone else speaks first. So you do. Not out of malice, but out of duty. Out of survival. And because, frankly, you don't want the rest of the group to think you're soft. Historians still argue how deep this mutual surveillance went. Some believe it was exaggerated by outsiders shocked by Spartan conformity. Others claim it was a deliberate tool to erase individuality before it could take root. Either way, in your experience, the walls have ears, and the ears belong to the boys beside you. You begin to develop a kind of double thought. The internal you, silent and questioning, and the external you, loud, obedient, and perfectly sculpted for public display. You nod when told to. You speak when expected. You stop raising questions, even in your mind. Because what's the point? Dissent has nowhere to go. You have one small rebellion, though. A stone. Smooth. Oval-shaped. You found it by the river during water drills. It fits perfectly in your palm. You don't tell anyone. You hide it beneath your straw mat. Every night, before sleep, you hold it in the dark just for a second. It's not a weapon, not useful, but it's yours. And that feels like something. Your days are spent in crowds, group training, group meals, group punishments. When one boy breaks a rule, the whole cohort suffers. One time, someone speaks out of turn. The entire group is made to stand in freezing wind, arms raised, until the stars fade. You never find out who it was. Maybe they confessed privately. Maybe they didn't. But the message is clear. You are one body, one mind, one voice. Even laughter isn't private. You're allowed to joke, but only in controlled tones. No wild fits, no loud bursts. The instructors say laughter weakens the jawline. You think that's nonsense, but you keep it to yourself. Everything is kept to yourself now. There's a quirky tradition during mealtime. If a boy takes too long to chew, others stare at him until he swallows. Chewing is selfish, someone once explained. Swallow and move on. It sounds absurd. It is absurd, but you follow it. One evening, you try to sit alone, just for a minute. Just one moment of silence. An instructor walks by and pauses. "Who gave you permission to be an island?" he says. You quickly slide closer to the group. No one comments. They don't have to. And yet, despite it all, you adapt. The constant proximity, the shared sweat, the noise, it all becomes familiar. You stop noticing the lack of solitude because there's no solitude to compare it to. You speak less. Think in shorter phrases. Breathe in sync with others. You begin to find comfort not in silence, but in uniformity. You don't miss being alone. You forget what it felt like. Your thoughts belong to Sparta now. And oddly, that starts to feel okay. Your teachers are not educators. They are not mentors in the cozy sense, or coaches with encouraging catchphrases. They are soldiers tough, weathered, humorless. Their lessons aren't about expanding your mind. They're about shrinking your softness, teaching you how not to feel too much, how to obey, not understand, and how to become less like a boy and more like a blade. These men don't smile. Not because their angry anger, at least, would feel human. Number. They don't smile because they believe emotion is a liability. Compassion? A slow death. And praise? That's for poets and mothers. Your first real interaction with one is memorable. He walks into the training yard with the gait of someone who hasn't relaxed a muscle in 20 years. His voice is gravel on granite. He doesn't say his name. He just points. At you. Run. You do. Faster. You try. Fall. You hesitate. Now. You drop. No explanation. No lesson plan. Just command and compliance. He walks away before you get up. That's your first class. And so it continues. Day after day, commands without context. Strike. Hold. Lift. Repeat. You are not taught why. You are not given history, or philosophy. The Spartans see knowledge not as a fire to be kindled, but as a weapon to be sharpened. Precision matters. Theory doesn't. And when you ask questions, the response is usually the same: a raised eyebrow or a silent, withering stare that makes you wish you'd just stayed quiet. Historians still argue whether Spartan education truly lacked intellectual depth, or if that part simply got overshadowed by the legend of their toughness. Some sources say poetry and music were part of early training. Others insist those were mere accessories to a fundamentally martial system. But in your reality, the only poetry you hear is shouted in rhythm during drills, and the only music is the sound of boots on dirt. There is no written homework. Your assignments are physical. Run 10 miles barefoot. Hold a plank until your arms shake. Stand in freezing rain without blinking. And always, do not complain. Complaining is punished, not corrected. Even the tone of your voice matters. Speak too lightly, and you're told you sound Athenian. And that's the deepest insult. Your instructors carry sticks not to point at the board, there is no board, but to snap at the ground near your feet when you falter. Not to hit you, just close enough to remind you they could, that they will. That pain is always an option, and when they do hit, it's not out of fury. It's part of the lesson. 1, strike. 2, move better. Speak less. Think faster. Or don't think at all. There's a kind of ranking among instructors too. The cruel ones are feared, but the quiet ones, they're worse. Because you never see it coming. The worst punishment you receive is from a man who barely speaks all week then. One morning, calls your name, and without warning, orders you to hold a squat position with a heavy stone on your shoulders for an hour. He doesn't yell. He doesn't even watch. Just waits like a farmer watching wheat grow. You wobble. You fall. You're told to start again. No encouragement. No scolding. Just silence. The silence hurts more. And yet, somehow, you begin to admire them. Not in the way you'd admire a storyteller or a warrior, but with a strange, cold respect. Because they're consistent. Because they never flinch. Because they believe so deeply in what they're doing that it becomes almost holy. You start to mimic their posture, their short, clipped way of speaking, their habit of standing with feet slightly apart, always ready. You begin to understand. They're not here to teach you facts. They're here to erase what doesn't belong. There's a curious ritual once a week. They make each boy recite something called a discipline phrase. It changes often. Obedience is freedom. Pain is the gatekeeper. The group is the body. I am the limb. The first few times, you say it through gritted teeth. Later, you begin to believe it. Not because it makes sense, but because nothing else does. You try to imagine them smiling once. It's difficult. You picture one of your instructors at home, maybe eating bread with his wife, maybe tossing a pebble to a child. You can't. You don't want to. The illusion must stay whole. If they smile, they become human. And if they're human, then maybe they're wrong. And if they're wrong, what does that make everything you've been through? So number, they don't smile, and you stop expecting it. You start seeing the lack of expression as normal, as professional, as necessary. One of your instructors carries a scar across his scalp. It splits through his hair like a river. He never talks about it. You want to ask. But something tells you that story isn't for you. Maybe no story is. Maybe the point is that he carries it silently, like you're supposed to carry your wounds, not as decoration, but as discipline. Eventually, You stop looking at their faces for emotion. You look for clues instead. A twitch of the eye, a shift in posture. You become a reader of shoulders and eyebrows. It's the only way to know what's coming, and maybe someday how to become one of them. Because here's the secret no one says aloud. Becoming an instructor is one of the highest honors. Not because you teach, but because it means you survived. You endured. You didn't break. And now, you are trusted to break others just enough to make them stronger. Tears are not forbidden in Sparta. They're worse than that. They're mocked, dismissed, treated as a failure of training, a crack in the armor of your soul. Crying is what children do in other cities, you're told. In soft cities, with soft parents. In Sparta, you do not cry. You do not flinch. You do not wear your feelings on your face like some poorly tied sandal. You wear them like a hidden dagger, tight, silent, ready. Your first instinct to cry isn't from pain. Not physical, anyway. It's when your friend, let's call him Menno, is punished for something you did. You stole a strip of dried meat, and he was blamed. You didn't speak up. You didn't move. You watched him get 10 lashes with a vine whip, his face clenched, his back red and raw. He didn't cry either. Not a sound. Later, when you offer him the meat, he doesn't take it. Doesn't speak, but he doesn't tell. That silence is heavier than any punishment. You want to cry, not for you, but for him. But you swallow it, deep, like poison. The art of not crying becomes a daily practice, a discipline. You start by learning to breathe through pain. Slow, shallow, like an injured animal hiding in tall grass. Then you learn to change your thoughts. When your leg burns during a run, you picture cold water. When your knuckles bleed from drills, you think of smooth stones in the river. You build a fortress in your mind. Tall walls, narrow gates, and nothing gets in unless you allow it. Historians debate how emotionally repressed Spartans truly were. Some argue they had deep emotional bonds, just expressed differently through action, loyalty, and sacrifice. Others believe the system deliberately stripped boys of tenderness, making them emotionally numb by design. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But for you, in the dirt and dust and discipline, it feels like emotions are excess weight and crying the most obvious sign you're still dragging it around. There's a daily exercise called the still face. Everyone lines up. An instructor walks the row, trying to provoke you. A sudden shout, a slap, an insult about your mother. You must not react, not even blink. If your lips twitch, you're out. If your brow furrows, run 10 laps. If you cry, everyone suffers. One boy fails the drill. Tears well in his eyes, just one or two, but enough. The punishment is not his alone. The entire group is denied dinner. You go to bed with an empty stomach, and in the dark, no one speaks to him. Not out of cruelty, but because here, emotional control is survival. If you crack, we all crack. There's a strange detail you begin to notice older boys who never touch their faces. No wiping sweat, no rubbing eyes. You learn why. It becomes habit. If you touch your face, someone might think you're hiding tears. And in Sparta, perception matters almost as much as action. One instructor, perhaps the cruelest, shares a saying, "A tear is a flag. Raise it, and your enemies will charge." It sounds dramatic. It is. But it sticks. So you train your eyes to sting without leaking. You let the salt burn, let the pressure build, and you do nothing. Eventually, the tears stop coming altogether. Not because the pain has stopped, but because the signal has been turned off. Rewired. You have not become stronger. You have become unreadable. You wonder sometimes if that's truly strength. if hiding every emotion makes you better or just harder. But that thought is dangerous. So you shove it into the back of your mind, behind the wall, where it won't interfere with drills and chants and the next round of sparring. There's one moment that breaks through, though. During an evening march, an older boy in your group stumbles. His ankle snaps at a wrong angle, and the sound is wet and sharp. He doesn't scream, doesn't cry. He tries to get up, can't. The instructor steps forward, offers no help, just says, "You walk or you crawl," but you finish. And so the boy crawls. 10 paces, 20, hands bloodied. You watch, heart pounding. You want to help. You don't. But your throat tightens in a way you haven't felt in weeks. Something stirs. A crack. A flicker. Later that night, under the brittle moonlight, you look at your own hands. No blisters. No cuts. You were fine today. But your eyes feel heavy, so you bury your face in the crook of your elbow and wait. Nothing comes. Just the echo of tears that could have been. And so you sleep, dry-eyed, hardened, not broken exactly, but sealed. And in Sparta, that's what passes for progress. There's a quiet shift that happens around your 14th year. The drills stay the same. The pain is familiar. But now, the lessons go darker. Less about muscle, more about silence. Less about standing tall, more about disappearing. You begin to notice changes in the way your instructors speak. They watch you differently, as if trying to see not how fast you run, but how invisible you can be. Because now, your training takes a new turn, one where obedience blends with obedience's eerie cousin, obedience without witness. You're introduced to something whispered more than spoken, the cryptia. You don't get a welcome speech, just a new kind of assignment. You're told to observe a helot. That's the term for Sparta's enslaved population, the native people of Laconia, bound to serve the Spartan state. You've seen them before, work in the fields, carrying loads, eyes down, always avoiding yours. Now you're told to watch them, quietly, closely. No interaction, just surveillance. It feels strange. You're not used to hiding. Your training was about presence, about endurance. But now, stealth becomes sacred. You learn to follow without being heard, to sit without moving, to track from shadows. The woods around Sparta become your classroom. The branches are teachers, the wind your ally. You're told to move like a whisper and see like a hawk. And then, one day, it escalates. You're not told directly, you overhear it. A boy older, trusted, is congratulated. For what? No one says. But you see the way others look at him afterward. Not with fear, with reverence. He completed a task. You piece it together. It wasn't just watching. It was removal, elimination. He killed a helot. Historians still argue about the cryptia. Was it truly a secret teenage death squad? Or more like a paramilitary rite of passage? Some scholars think it was state-sponsored terrorism, used to keep the helot population terrified, obedient. Others argue it was exaggerated later by writers who wanted to paint Sparta as darker than it was. But in your lived experience, the line is blurry. You are not told to kill, but you are not told not to. Your tasks get bolder. One evening, you're given a knife, not for training, for readiness. You're told to carry it always, not visibly, just in case. In case of what? No one says. That's part of the test. Knowing when, knowing who, knowing how far to go, and when to stop just short. The cryptia isn't a group you join. It's a role you're tested into without knowing the test has started. Some boys brag in whispers about their observations. Others stay completely silent. You don't know which is wiser, You keep your mouth shut. There's one particular helot you've been told to watch. An older man with a limp. You think he's harmless. But that's not your call. You track him for 3 days. You learn his routine, when he collects water, where he naps, how he always looks over his shoulder, even when no one's behind him. He feels it too, the watching. Then he vanishes. You don't know where. You're not told, just reassigned to another target. You don't ask questions. You begin to feel a detachment you never expected. Not cruelty, not hatred, just numbness, like watching from behind a glass wall. You're not taught to hate the helots. You're taught to see them as a threat, not individuals. A mass, a potential uprising. And fear is the reason. They outnumber Spartans by a wide margin. If they ever rebel, it's said, Sparta would fall within days. So fear becomes law. Preemptive action becomes policy. Even if the enemy hasn't acted yet, you start noticing details you never cared about before. A whisper in the marketplace, a glance exchanged between field workers. Is it a plot? Probably not. But what if it is? Paranoia becomes a skill. Doubt becomes a tool. There's a quirky superstition among the older boys. Before every observation task, they whisper to a small stone and toss it into a stream. It's said to carry the burden away. You do it once. It feels silly. But a few days later, when the burden gets heavier, you do it again. And what of guilt? It's not discussed, not even acknowledged. If you bring it up, you're looked at as if you failed a basic test. You are told, we do what must be done so that others don't have to. That phrase is repeated often, like a shield, like a balm. But late at night, as you stare into the dark, you wonder, who decides what must be done, and how much of your silence is strength, and how much is surrender? The next morning, you're back in the field, watching, listening. The boy beside you has a new scar. No one asks. You nod. He nods. That's enough. You've crossed a line. Quietly, slowly, without fanfare. You are no longer just a trainee. You are now part of the state's shadow. And in Sparta, the shadow is just as powerful as the sword. It begins without warning. One night, long after the last chant has ended, and your herd has drifted into exhausted sleep, an instructor steps into the dormitory. His footsteps are soundless on the stone floor, but somehow everyone hears him. You sit up before he reaches your mat. He doesn't speak, just nods. You rise quietly, leaving behind your blanket, your cloak, your name. No one else stirs. They know what this means, or at least they think they do. You follow him out into the night. The moon hangs low, caught in a thin veil of cloud. The wind smells like olives and something metallic. You walk for a long time past the barracks, past the last farms, into the scrubby hills outside the city. At some point, the instructor vanishes. You don't see where he goes. One moment he's ahead of you, the next, just absence. That's when you realize you're alone. Not symbolically, truly. No gear, no food. Just a small knife strapped to your thigh and a short message from earlier that day, barely more than a whisper. Return when you are ready. This is the Cryptia, or at least your first taste of it. A solo journey into the wilderness, not as punishment, but as proof. You are expected to live off the land, observe the helots in the region, report to no one, survive without being seen, and perhaps eliminate a threat, if there is one, if you choose to, if you dare. Historians still debate what the Cryptius truly was. Was it a proto-secret service? A psychological test? A cultural rite designed to sever the final thread between boyhood And the state? Some say it was a state-sanctioned blood ritual. Others claim it was more about endurance and isolation. But from where you stand, cold and disoriented under an indifferent sky, it feels like exile with consequences. You start walking. The terrain is rough stones that bite your feet, shrubs that snag your legs. You can't light a fire. You can't make noise. So you move slowly, quietly, hugging the shadows of low walls and thickets. Hunger returns like an old friend. So does fear. Not fear of attack, but fear of being seen, of being caught, of failing. You find shelter in a shallow cave your second night. A crack in the hillside barely big enough to lie in. It smells like damp fur and ancient ash. You don't sleep well. Every sound becomes a threat. Every shadow, a silhouette. You grip the knife in your palm until it leaves an imprint you can still see by morning. The days blur. You forage. Wild greens. A snail. Once, you catch a rat. You eat it raw. You gag. You do it anyway. And all the while, you watch. The helots in the fields below move in patterns. They gather water, harvest olives, return at dusk. You begin to recognize them. A woman with a crooked walk. A boy who hums when he works. A man who always glances up at the hills, perhaps sensing you. There's one night when you almost act. You spot a figure sneaking out of a house after dark. You follow. Heart racing. Hands cold. Is he a threat? A rebel? A man with a sick child? You never find out. You stop yourself at the edge of the village. Because once you step past that line, there's no going back. You return to your cave. Lie on the stone. Think about the boy with the fox under his cloak. You wonder now, was he brave or broken? On the seventh day, you're no longer afraid. You're just numb. Movement becomes automatic. Observation becomes instinct. You stop caring what time it is. You stop missing your herd. You stop expecting someone to come find you. And then, just before dawn, on the 10th morning, a stone rolls near your cave entrance. Not by accident. Deliberate, you wait. A figure appears, hooded, silent. He kneels, draws a shape in the dirt, a triangle. Then he leaves. That's your signal. You're done. You return the way you came. Slower this time, emptier. When you reach the edge of the city, no one greets you. No welcome. No questions. You simply walk back to your herd, lie on your mat, and close your eyes. Someone places a piece of bread near your hand. You don't ask who. You eat it. No one speaks of it the next day. Not aloud. But the way they look at you changes. A little more room when you walk. A little more silence when you speak. You are not praised, but you are noted. And you are never quite the same. The ground is colder than you remembered. Or maybe you've just become more aware of it. Aware of everything. The sting of wind across your bare arms. The brittle crunch of pebbles under your feet. The smell of pine sap and distant ash. Out here, discipline begins to erode. And in its place, something more primal grows. Not rage, not weakness. Something quieter. A fear that isn't loud but constant. Like a slow leak in your courage. You are still alone. Your cave, if you can even call it that, is damp and tight. More a crevice than shelter. You spend nights curled like a leaf, ears pricked, listening to the forest breathe around you. Every rustle becomes a pattern. Every pattern becomes a threat. And the worst sounds are the ones that never repeat, because those might be something alive, something watching back. You are hungry, all the time. Not sharp, stomach-grabbing hunger anymore. That's gone. Now it's dull, fuzzy, like you're moving underwater. Your body is lighter than it should be. Your steps wobble sometimes. You try to eat roots, insects, wild herbs you think are safe. But every bite is a gamble. One leaf might feed you. The next might paralyze you. You learn quickly. Or you don't learn at all. You still carry your knife. Not as a weapon, as an anchor. It's the only thing left that proves you belong to someone, to something. The state, the training, yourself. You sleep with it pressed to your chest like a relic. Historians still debate whether these wilderness missions were truly life or death or more symbolic. Some say they were tightly supervised from afar, that no boy was ever really left alone. Others argue these trials were real, raw exposure to fear, hunger, and moral ambiguity. Your experience doesn't feel like ceremony. It feels like survival. You don't speak for days, not out loud. Your thoughts become clipped, wordless. You stop forming full sentences in your mind. You start thinking like an animal. Smell, hide, watch, wait. One night, you spot movement near the ridge. A flicker of cloth, a shadow too upright. Another boy? A helot? You crouch low, body coiled, breath shallow. They don't see you. You don't approach. You just watch. Because watching is what you've been trained to do. You are no longer a boy with a name. You are an eye in the brush, a whisper behind a tree. There's something strange that happens after the fourth or fifth night you stop being scared. Not because you're braver, because you're tired. Fear requires energy. And right now, you don't have any to spare. You simply exist, like the wind, like the insects, like the dying leaves that fall without ceremony. One evening, while crouched near a stream, you see your reflection, and it startles you. Your cheeks are hollow, your eyes too wide. You look older, not wiser, just used, like a tool that's been handled too many times. You smile, just to see if you can. The face in the water doesn't smile back. There's a superstition among the boys who've done this before, though none speak of it aloud. They say the forest can change your name, that if you stay out long enough, who you were begins to rot away like old fruit. Maybe that's why the instructors never call you by your real name again after this. They just nod, and you nod back. On the sixth night, a storm rolls in. Cold rain needles your skin. You don't run. There's nowhere to run to. You huddle under a bush, mud soaking into your legs. Lightning cracks the sky. You count the seconds between flash and thunder. That used to comfort you, back when storms were something you watched from home. Now, they're part of you. And still, you watch. Always watch. The helots below continue their lives, unaware, or pretending to be. They harvest quietly. They cook. They sing, sometimes. You hear a lullaby once floating through the trees. It hurts more than the hunger. Not because it's sad, because it's soft, gentle. Things you were once allowed to have. One night you make a decision. You creep down to the edge of a farm path and leave behind a small bundle of food you've gathered bitter roots and a strip of dried meat you saved from your entry pack. You leave it on a stone. You don't wait to see who takes it. You just leave it, then vanish back into the dark. Why? You don't know. Maybe it's weakness. Maybe it's rebellion. Maybe, deep down, it's what's left of you before Sparta finishes the job. No one finds out. No one punishes you. But the next morning, you find a new track on the trail. Small, barefoot, heading in a different direction. You study it for a long time. Your week ends not with a call, but with silence. The same instructor who brought you out simply appears. No questions, no expression, just a nod. You follow. When you return, no one greets you. No one celebrates. A boy in your herd looks up, You look back. Nothing is said. But something is different. You're back in the city, but the wilderness hasn't left you. You've spent so long focused on drills, on bruises and orders and hunger, that you almost forget there's another world beyond the barracks. And then, one day, you're marched to the edge of a training field, told to stand in formation, and you see them. Spartan girls. And they are not what you expected. They don't wear flowing robes. No dainty sandals or soft voices. They're barefoot, like you. Hair tied tight or left wild. And they're shouting, not at each other, at you. You run like a goat in mud, one calls. My baby brother throws javelins straighter. You are stunned. They grin. These girls aren't being rude. They're doing their job. In Sparta, female citizens are trained too, not for battle, but for strength, endurance, and most importantly, for producing strong future warriors. Weakness in a boy isn't just embarrassing, it's offensive. And Spartan girls are taught early to mock it, stomp it out, and never, ever let it pass unnoticed. They wrestle, race, lift, dance though not like dancers. Their dances are full of stomps, chants, athletic displays. Less ballet, more battle cry. You're told to spar against them sometimes, not gently. They don't hold back, and neither should you. You learn quickly that underestimating them earns bruises in new places. One girl, lean and fast, flips you during a drill. You land hard. The boys around you stifle laughter. She doesn't. She just raises an eyebrow and walks off. You're still thinking about it 2 days later. Historians continue to marvel at the relative freedom of Spartan women compared to the rest of Greece. They owned land, were educated, and participated in sports. Some believe this autonomy was a side effect of Spartan men always being away at war. Others argue it was a deliberate part of the city's vision of balance and strength. Either way, it's clear. Women here are not ornaments. They're steel in linen form. You begin to see them differently, not as sisters or potential wives, but as competitors, as equals, and sometimes dangerously as judges. Their opinions carry weight. Praise from one is a currency stronger than an instructor's nod. You want to impress them, not with words, with deeds. During one public festival, you're part of a running demonstration. The girls are lined up on the opposite side, arms folded, evaluating. You run harder that day, not for glory, not even for your herd, just for that half-second nod from one girl who once beat you at climbing a tree and hasn't let you forget it. There's a quirky custom in Sparta where girls compose short, biting poems about the boys. The best ones are recited during events. They're funny, brutal. One boy is compared to a turtle who forgot how to crawl. Another is described as strong in the arms, empty in the head. You laugh until you hear your own name, woven into a verse that rhymes with sweats and forgets. You swallow the shame. It fuels your next training session better than any speech. The girls aren't cruel. They're sharp, proud. They've been raised on the same values: discipline, strength, loyalty. Their schooling includes poetry, music, physical training. No embroidery circles, no polite tea. They're expected to be ready. Not for war, but for life with warriors. And that requires steel of another kind. One day, a younger girl visits the training yard. She can't be older than 9. She watches you spar. When you win, she claps once. When you lose, she crosses her arms and mutters, "Too slow." You realize that judgment in Sparta starts early and never stops. You're told the old phrase, "A Spartan woman tells her son to return with his shield or on it." It sounds dramatic, but now you understand. They mean it. They expect it. And And strangely, knowing that makes you want to become worthy of it. You start training harder, not just for yourself, not just for Sparta, but because someone is always watching. And not just the instructors. The girls are watching, judging, waiting. And in Sparta, there is no pain like the pain of being laughed at by someone who can outrun you. You return, but no one calls you a man. Not yet. Not officially. The transition isn't marked with a drumbeat or ceremonial feast. It's quieter than that, just a change in how people stand around you. A shift in tone. The instructors stop barking as much. The other boys move slightly aside when you pass. They don't say why. They don't have to. You are now on the threshold, Melerin, a soon-to-be man. You've survived the Cryptia, or something like it. You've spent years under watch, under fists, under the cold and sky and silence. And now, maybe, you're becoming what they always said you would, a citizen of Sparta. Maybe. But the word citizen here doesn't mean what it means in other cities. In Athens, for example, it comes with voting rights, property, maybe a scroll and sandals. Here, it means responsibility, supervision, ownership of you, not by you. At 16, you're too old to be a child, but too young to be free. You're moved from the boys' dormitory into a new grouping, alongside others your age. You train separately now, harder, longer. The drills feel more serious, less about learning, more about demonstrating. Everyone's watching you for cracks. Everyone assumes you're preparing for the next phase, the one step closer to becoming a Spartiates, a full member of Sparta's elite warrior caste. But you know that assumption is dangerous. Many reach this point. Not all make it further. There are new expectations. You're assigned a mentor, an adult male citizen, possibly a former instructor, possibly someone unknown to you. He does not train you. He evaluates, talks less, listens more. You are told to walk with him, dine with him, attend festivals. He watches how you carry yourself in public, how you handle wine, how you speak in a group. It's a test, but one that never announces itself. Historians debate how fluid this transition truly was. Some claim there were formal ranks, tests, titles. Others argue it was more social, a network of observations and quiet nods, where promotion came by unspoken approval. Either way, nothing is written down, and no one tells you when you've passed. You feel older now. Your body has changed. You've grown taller, stronger, quieter. You speak in shorter phrases. You listen before you act. You no longer flinch at raised voices or raised hands. You've become, as one mentor mutters, useful. There's one right you didn't expect. Silence. At certain communal meals, you're required to sit through the entire meal without speaking unless addressed directly. It's harder than it sounds. Not because you want to talk, but because every moment is a test of poise, of calm. You eat with precision. You sit with purpose. And when a senior citizen glances your way, you meet his gaze briefly, then look away. Just enough to show confidence. Just enough to show respect. You are allowed to carry a short sword now, not for battle, for ceremony, for weight. You feel it against your side like a promise, or a warning. One evening, you're invited to observe a council session, not as a participant, of course, but as a shadow in the back of the room. You watch older men debate laws, discipline, warfare. You don't understand every word, but the tone is clear, serious, terse, layered with history. They've all survived what you survived, and more. And now they shape the laws you will live under. Maybe, someday, shape yourself. There's a quirky custom among your group. Each boy chooses a stone and keeps it in his cloak. The stone is not to be shown or explained. It's symbolic of something only he understands: courage, loss, ambition. You carry yours everywhere. A rounded pebble from the river near your childhood home. You don't remember why you took it, but now it feels necessary, like a memory you can touch without speaking aloud. One day, you're asked to oversee a younger group during drills. It feels strange, correcting posture, giving orders, repeating the very words you used to hear. You say them softer than your instructors did, but no one comments. You're allowed now, trusted, and still you wait for the moment, the title, the nod that says, you are now a citizen. But it never comes, not all at once. Instead, it drips in slowly. You're allowed to stand closer at public events. Your name is added to a roster. Your mentor calls you young man instead of boy. And one evening, you're invited to sit at the Sasichimar, the communal meal for full citizens. You don't speak. You barely breathe. But you're there. That night, back in your quarters, one of the others asks if you feel different now. You think about it. Then you shrug. Maybe. You're 18. In most places, that would mean freedom, choice, the A key to something. But in Sparta, it's more like a heavier chain now polished maybe, but still fastened tight. You are no longer a trainee. You're now a fully operational piece of the state. And you're expected to act like it, breathe like it, wake and move and speak like it, but never for yourself. You've technically passed your agoge. The boyhood training is done. Your bones have set into hard angles. Your voice no longer cracks. Your scars are no longer fresh, but they're still visible. And yet, the one thing you expected, autonomy, is nowhere to be found. Because you are not free. You belong to Sparta. Entirely. Your schedule remains rigid. Drills continue. Patrols. Supervised sparring. But now there's more. You are placed under the scrutiny of the Ephor's powerful magistrates who oversee Spartan life. They watch everything. Who you associate with. What you say. How you hold your spear. Even how you walk in public. And if something seems off, they don't ask, they punish. Historians still argue whether Spartan 18-year-olds had any personal agency. Some claim they could own land, court wives, even vote in early matters. Others argue that until 30, they remained in a kind of martial limbo, citizens in training, but not yet truly autonomous. From your experience, it feels like being granted a louder voice in a choir where you're still not allowed to choose the song. You are given duties, guarding the city walls, training younger boys, overseeing helot labor. But these duties are not requested. They're assigned. You carry them out without question. Because questioning, at your level, is still considered weakness. Or worse, arrogance. Your living situation hasn't changed much. You don't live alone. You don't sleep in a home. You still stay in communal barracks. Even if your family owns a house, you're not allowed to move in. Not yet. Maybe later. If you prove yourself. There's a strange ceremony, one evening, that marks your shift into this almost man stage. You and others your age are made to stand in a line while older citizens walk past. Some nod, others don't. No one explains what the nods mean. You suspect they're reading your posture, your stare, the shape of your silence. You try not to blink. Your name is written down now in the city's public record, not as a full citizen, but as a candidate. You are told, from now on, you serve not just the state, you are the state. It sounds noble. It feels heavier than it sounds. There's a quirky tradition that starts at this age. You're allowed to wear a second cloak, a red one, used in battle drills. The red, they say, hides blood. But more than that, it's symbolic. You are closer to the front line, closer to danger, closer to something final. You wear it with pride, but you never forget what it means. You also begin to notice how little room you have for personal thought. Every decision, every opinion must be aligned with Spartan values. If someone hears you questioning a rule or discussing the merits of another city's ideas like Athenian democracy, you're summoned. Not beaten, just spoken to. Sternly, slowly, like they're reminding you who owns your voice. Relationships are monitored. You can begin courting, in theory, but even that isn't private. You need approval. You don't choose a wife for love. You choose one who's strong, from the right family, who can produce strong sons. If you're seen laughing too often in public with the same woman, someone will comment. If you're not seen with anyone at all, someone will comment on that too. One evening, your mentor asks you a question. What would you do if the state ordered you to harm someone you cared about? You pause. Try to find the smart answer. He shakes his head. There's only one answer in Sparta. Obey. You don't sleep well that night. The idea of personal ambition? Of doing something just because? It's almost non-existent. You want to carve a wooden token you found during the cryptia. Why? But you don't. You think about running outside the city walls for the sunrise, but you don't. Everything is directed, expected, supervised. You begin to understand. You're not a warrior who serves Sparta. You're an extension of Sparta itself. And yet, it's not all bleak. There's pride. Real pride. You are trusted now with weapons, with secrets, with responsibilities that shape the very bones of the city. You speak with more weight, walk with more authority. Children step aside when you pass. The younger boys you once trained now look at you the way you once looked at your instructors, with awe, with fear, with a little bit of hope. But freedom? That sweet, imagined thing? Not yet. Maybe not ever. You thought the training would end, or at least change. You imagined that once you passed the agoge, once you returned from the wilderness, once you earned your place among the older boys, the drills would soften, the pressure ease. But no, the drills don't end. They just grow quieter, smarter, deeper. Now it's not about how fast you can run, but how still you can stand. Not how many opponents you can fight, but how calmly you can endure. Training isn't just something you do anymore, it's something you are. Every motion, every meal, every glance has weight. And the worst part? You're always being watched. Not just by instructors now, by everyone. The Effers, those 5 officials who oversee nearly all Spartan life, are said to have eyes everywhere. If they see you slouching at a festival, that might come back to you next month in the form of extra duty. If you eat too slowly, speak too loudly, laugh too freely, someone notices. It's not paranoia, it's policy. Historians sometimes suggest that this constant surveillance created a kind of social paranoia. Others argue it maintained civic discipline. But from your perspective, it's both. You've learned to police yourself before anyone else has to. You hear your own voice in your head, correcting your posture. You dream in orders. Your daily schedule has shifted. You still drill, but now it's with adult formations. Shield walls, live weapons. The hits hurt more. The stakes are higher. You're expected to lead drills for younger recruits. At the same time, You're expected to listen when the elders speak, even when they say nothing for an hour straight. Patience becomes part of your training. So does restraint. There's a strange new duty too, patrolling the outskirts of the city. Not flashy, not heroic, but long, quiet. Sometimes days at a time, watching for signs of hellish unrest, checking the integrity of border markers. You carry a short spear, a water skin, and silence. That's it. You're told not to interfere unless ordered. Just observe, record, and if needed, respond without hesitation. The joke among your cohort is, in Sparta, even blinking is a drill. You laugh at it, quietly, because it's almost true. There's no part of your life that doesn't feel like performance, but it's not for applause. It's for cohesion, precision, control. You're also required now to attend the syssitia, the daily communal meals of full citizens. But you're not a full citizen yet, so you sit slightly back. You eat last. You speak never. And if you mess up, you might be reassigned. No one tells you where, or for how long. One evening, you spill a ladle of stew. It's nothing, just a drop. But a senior citizen sees it, doesn't speak, just shakes his head. That night, you're put on kitchen duty. For a week, you clean pots with cold sand. You sweep floors until the stones shine. And then, quietly, you're invited back to your place at the wall. Lesson learned. There's a quirky superstition among your age group. You never look directly at the effers. Not unless they speak to you first. It's not a rule, just wise. Some say they can see your thoughts if you hold eye contact too long. You don't know if that's true. You don't plan to find out. Despite all this, something strange starts to happen. You get used to it. The rhythm, the scrutiny, the repetition. You no longer resent the drills. You feel strange without them. On rest days, few and rare, you find yourself repeating formations in your head, counting steps as you walk. You notice when others walk offbeat. It bothers you. You've internalized the system. It's in your bones now, and there's pride in that. When a new recruit stumbles, you're the one who catches him. Not kindly, not softly, but with steadiness. You correct his grip, adjust his stance. He nods, you nod back. It's a small moment, but it feels important. Sometimes you overhear visitors from other cities talking about Sparta. They're in awe, or fear. They whisper about how strange it is, this city with no walls, no private life, no softness. You don't argue. You don't explain. Because Sparta doesn't explain itself. The training never ends. But it no longer feels like punishment. It feels like gravity. Something that holds you in place, that keeps your limbs sharp and your breath steady. You begin to see the logic. In a world where war is constant, peace is just a pause between drills. And so you drill. You train. You march. You stay sharp. Not because someone tells you to, but because you no longer know how not to. You don't propose. You don't kneel. You don't write poetry or braid wreaths of flowers. In Sparta, marriage isn't a love story. It's a transaction between the state and its future. And your wedding night? It begins with kidnapping. Not a metaphorical one, a literal one. You're told in advance, not much, just that it's time. You're of age, strong enough, proven enough, and someone likely your elders, possibly your family, has chosen a match. She's young, strong, trained like you, sharp as flint. You may have seen her before, maybe not, doesn't matter. One evening, as you're returning from patrol, someone stops you. Another young man, a bit older, grins slightly and says, "Tonight." That's the only warning you get. And then, in the dark, you're taken, abducted, Spartan style, by friends or cousins of the bride, and dragged to a private home. There, she waits. Her head is shaved, her cloak plain, her face set like stone. She says nothing. You say nothing. This is the ritual. She cuts her hair short to resemble a boy, a symbol of transition, of leaving childhood. It's also, perhaps, meant to ease your nerves, you, who have barely interacted with women, who have lived in barracks and been taught to view emotion with suspicion. Historians debate the purpose of this hair cutting. Some say it symbolized equality. Others say it was meant to strip identity. What's certain is that you find it oddly comforting. She looks more familiar, less overwhelming. You do not sleep together, not in the romantic sense. You lie beside each other, tense, awkward, unsure. You may speak, you may not. No one teaches you this part. There's no class for tenderness in the agoge. By morning, you're gone again. That's how it works. You do not move in with your wife. You return to the barracks. You continue your duties. You may visit her at night, discreetly, as tradition allows, but always in secret, always with care. The courtship happens in reverse: first marriage, then connection, maybe love, if you're lucky. And what of her? She is not idle. Spartan women are not homemakers in the usual sense. She manages land, slaves, household affairs. She trains, exercises, and speaks her mind often loudly. You've heard that some Spartan wives mock their husbands publicly if they underperform. You believe it. One look from her is sharper than any dagger. There's a quirky phrase Spartans love. Only Spartan women give birth to real men. It's both praise and pressure. You're expected to prove yourself worthy of her, and of the sons she might bear. You meet in darkness whenever your duties allow. The secrecy adds tension, mystery, even a strange kind of intimacy. You speak in whispers. Sometimes you argue. She doesn't flinch. Neither do you. It feels like sparring, but warmer. You begin to respect her, deeply, maybe even more than your instructors. She's not impressed by your muscles or your scars. She wants to know how fast you think, how clearly you speak, whether you can build a life as well as you build a shield wall. You still train, still march, still eat in the mess hall. But now, there's a new weight on your shoulders. Not unpleasant, just different. You're responsible for more than yourself now. For her. For the future you might raise together. And yet, nothing in your life belongs to you. Historians often highlight the strangeness of Spartan marriage, the secrecy, the role reversal, the absence of romantic ritual. But from where you stand, it makes a certain kind of sense. In a society that treats emotion like a tool, connection is earned, not assumed. And perhaps that's why, when it does form, it feels unshakable. One night, as you leave her house, she grabs your wrist. Just for a second, nothing dramatic, just pressure, brief and firm. You look at her. She nods once. You nod back, then disappear into the night. It's the closest thing to love you've felt in years. You're married, technically. But don't let that fool you into imagining a home with shared blankets, warm stew, and slow mornings. This is Sparta. You don't live with your wife. You still live with your unit. In a communal barracks that smells like sweat and ash and wool cloaks damp from morning dew. Romance exists here at a distance, like a campfire on the other side of the river. Warm, visible, unreachable. The rule is simple. Until you're 30, your allegiance is to your fellow soldiers. Your body, your strength, your time, they belong to Sparta. The state can't risk emotional distraction. Domestic comfort is seen as softness. and softness, as you've been told 1,000 times, spreads like mold. So even after marriage, you return to the same wooden bunk, the same stone floor, the same hard bread, and shared spoon. But that doesn't mean you never see her. You do. Occasionally, carefully. Sometimes she visits you at night when it's dark enough. She walks quietly across the training yard, steps around sleeping forms, and finds you waiting behind the armory. She brings nothing, says little, but her presence is grounding. You hold hands, sometimes more. Then, before dawn, she's gone. This arrangement is not considered tragic. It's normal, expected. The other men do the same. You exchange knowing looks when someone slips back in at sunrise with a trace of ash on his cloak. No one teases, no one reports. It's the one form of disobedience the state pretends not to notice because it's not disobedience at all. It's part of the design. Historians are fascinated by this aspect of Spartan life. Most Greek city-states viewed marriage as the cornerstone of public stability. In Sparta, it's treated more like a partnership contract, efficient, strategic, productive. Some scholars believe this separation created stronger warrior cohesion. Others think it simply delayed emotional attachment. You, living it, aren't sure anymore where one ends and the other begins. You try not to miss her. But some days, after a long march, after bloody drills, you think about the way she placed a boiled egg in your palm once, still warm. No words, just the gesture. It stays with you longer than any chant. There's a tradition now, when a wife gives birth, the husband doesn't attend. The news is passed through channels. If the child is male and healthy, it is examined by elders. If approved, it lives. If not, well, you know what happens. You're not expected to show emotion either way. Joy is private. Grief is unacceptable. You begin to notice something else. The younger recruits look at you the way you once looked at the older boys. They whisper about your marriage. Some envy it. Others fear it. You say little, but occasionally you find yourself offering advice. Nothing poetic. Just don't talk too much. Don't ask if she misses you. Just show up. There's a quirky tradition among married men in the barracks. On your wedding anniversary, if you remember the date, you place a single stone outside your bunk. If another man notices it, he may place one beside it. A quiet acknowledgement. A shared nod. I see you. We're still part of this together. Life continues. You rise before the sun. Drill. March. Train. Eat. Drill again. There are nights when she doesn't come. Nights when you wait anyway. You don't blame her. The visits are hard. The risks are real. One wrong step, one misplaced word, and it could all change. But when she does come, the world briefly sharpens. Your body, battered and trained to respond to commands, remembers something softer, not weaker, just different. And then, like always, she's gone. You return to the line, to formation, to the endless rhythm. Because in Sparta, even love marches in cadence. There's no such thing as free time in Sparta. Not really. Every game, every chant, every flicker of joy is threaded with steel. You laugh, but you do it in formation. You sing, but the songs are battle hymns. Even your drinking games aren't really games. They're tests. And all of it, every moment is designed to do one thing: prepare you to kill. It starts with music. Yes, Sparta has music, but it's not soft. No liars whispering love songs. The rhythms are sharp, martial, pounding. You march to them, train to them, sleep to them. The melodies aren't complex, but they get under your skin. And when the drum beats at dusk, your heart automatically matches the tempo. That's the point. Then there are the dances. If you're picturing twirls and sandals and flowing robes, no. Spartan dance is closer to combat choreography. Stomping feet, synchronized steps, sudden bursts of motion that simulate striking, evading, holding a line. During festivals, whole units perform together, sweat shining on their foreheads, cloaks snapping in time with the beat. If one man falters, the formation stutters. That's shameful. You practice until you move like a river of limbs. Historians often scratch their heads at this. Why such emphasis on music and dance in a culture of warfare? Some argue it was psychological bonding the men through rhythm. Others think it was practical training reaction time. Awareness. Unity. You don't care. You just know it works. When a spear line moves in unison, it's beautiful, terrifying, and you're part of it. Even celebrations have a military edge. Take drinking. Yes, Spartans drink wine, but never to excess. Getting drunk is for helots, and sometimes helots are deliberately overserved just so Spartan boys can watch and learn what not to do. A twisted kind of theater. You're expected to remain controlled, even after 3 cups. If you stagger, someone will remember. If you slur your words, someone will report it. There are contests, too. Drinking games with consequences. One involves balancing a full cup on the back of your hand while wrestling. Another dares you to recite war chants backward while leaping over a fire pit. You participate. You win some. You lose one and end up with a singed cloak. You learn faster next time. Your jokes are about battle. Your riddles, about tactics. There's a game where you're blindfolded and must find your partner using only coded foot taps. It sounds playful. It's not. You're being trained to communicate without words, to move without sight, to trust without hesitation. There's a festival where you reenact old battles using wooden weapons. The crowd cheers not for victory, but for precision, for discipline. One boy gets too wild, swings off pattern, knocks another to the ground. The crowd goes silent. He's pulled from the event, and later you hear he's been reassigned. Not because he lost, because he lost control. And of course, there are the stories. Around the fire, in barracks or outposts, men tell tales of past glories. But they're never just stories. They're parables. Training by proxy. Remember the soldier who caught an arrow in his hand and used it to stab his enemy? Someone says. You nod. You've heard it before. You'll hear it again. You're expected to memorize tactics, formations, history, not from scrolls, but from repetition, oral transmission. One senior soldier mutters that you must sleep in phalanx. And you know what he means. Formation is not something you do. It's something you are. There's a quirky phrase you learn to live by. Even the cook trains to kill. It's half joke, half warning. No job in Sparta is exempt from military readiness. Farmers drill. Blacksmiths train. If your arms can hold a hammer, they can hold a spear. You once saw a boy cut wood so rhythmically it looked like swordplay. That was no accident. And then there's the way you're taught to speak. Spartan brevity isn't just cultural, it's tactical. Laconic wit, as outsiders call it, is born from necessity. Fewer words, clearer meaning. You once heard an instructor say, excess speech is a leaking shield. You didn't fully get it until one day in formation when you had to choose, shout a warning, or act. You acted. That's the lesson. Nothing is without purpose. Nothing is just for fun. A rope climbing race teaches grip strength. A race over embers builds nerve control. A storytelling contest forces you to command attention, the same skill you'll use to rally frightened men in battle someday. Even love, even marriage, even those quiet nights with your wife, if they exist, are meant to make you stronger. She doesn't coddle you. She questions you, sharpens you. Like a second instructor, but one who knows your fears. And slowly, you become what they want. A body that moves in rhythm, a voice that obeys without doubt, a mind that calculates under pressure, a hand that can kill and knows when not to. In other cities, war is an event, something that interrupts life. In Sparta, war is the current. Everything else floats on top. If you make it, they say. If. That word sits heavy in your chest. Because in Sparta, old age isn't assumed. It's earned. Fewer reach it than you'd think. War, training, exposure, discipline, it all chisels away at the body like water over stone. And if you do survive long enough to see gray hairs and a slower step, you don't lose honor. You gain something rarer, something no sword can win. Peace. It doesn't arrive with trumpets, no ceremony, no parade. Just a shift, a silence, a seat. One day, you're told to stop joining morning drills. Your name is moved on a roster. A younger man takes your place in the formation. And suddenly, your mornings are your own. Not for leisure, Sparta still doesn't believe in lounging, but for something else. Observation, guidance, memory. You become what the young ones call a geron, an elder. Not all old men earn that title, only those who've proven themselves. Not just through battle, but through behavior, composure, discipline. You didn't just survive, you lived rightly. And now, the city listens to you. Historians argue over how much power Spartan elders really had. Some claim they ruled from behind the scenes. Others say they were merely advisors. What you know is this. When you speak now, people stop moving. And in a city of motion, that's the greatest authority of all. You sit on the Gerizia, the Council of Elders, if chosen. You help decide laws. You interpret omens. You guide policy. Your words carry the weight of generations. You've earned that weight. You wear it like a second cloak. There's a strange lightness in your limbs now. Not because you're stronger, because you're no longer expected to prove it. For decades, every movement was measured. Now, you can simply move. The younger men still train. You watch them from a bench under the olive trees. Their cloaks flap. Their spears flash. Their eyes, full of the same hunger you once carried like a blade in your ribs. You nod when they do well. You say little. But when you do, speak a single word. A correction. A praise, it lands like thunder. There's a quirky custom you'd almost forgotten. In old age, you're allowed to grow your hair long again. A symbol, they say, that you've nothing left to prove. You run your fingers through it sometimes and remember the boy who once had it shaved to the scalp, trembling on his first day of agoge. You wonder what he'd say if he saw you now. Your wife is still sharp. Sharper, maybe. She runs the household like a general, jokes sharper than your old instructor's stick. She reminds you when to rest, when to eat, when to listen. You never really left the training field. It just changed shape. Your sons, if you had them, are now in training. You don't speak to them much. That's tradition. But once, you passed one of them in the yard. He didn't flinch, didn't bow, just nodded. That was enough. That was everything. You don't dream of battle anymore. You dream of rhythm, of chance, of stone corridors and sandals in the dust, of your first sparring match, your first failure, the fox story, the cold nights. the warmth of a fig pressed into your hand by someone who cared without speaking. And sometimes, just sometimes, you dream of peace not as an ending, but as a form of strength. Not softer, just quieter. There's a final honor Sparta gives, but only to the rarest few. If you live past 60, having never disgraced yourself, never failed the state, you're allowed to die in your own bed. Not on a battlefield, not in exile, but surrounded by memory. It's said that the names of such men are spoken for generations, not sung, not shouted, just remembered. You hope you'll be one of them. But even if not, you've made it this far. And in Sparta, that alone is a victory. You've reached the end, not of life, though it may feel that way, but of the long, narrow corridor that began when you were just 7 years old and the state took you from your mother's arms. You've walked every step, from the hunger, the cold, the chance, the blood, the silence. You've made it through the agoge, the cryptia, the barracks, the battlefield, the bench beneath the olive trees. You've seen boys turn into weapons, seen friends vanish without fanfare, seen discipline become identity. And now, with aching knees and a voice that speaks less but says more, you ask the question that no one dares to say out loud. Was it all worth it? Historians still argue. They always will. Some say Sparta was a miracle of social engineering, a society that forged unity, efficiency, and bravery at levels unmatched in the ancient world. Others say it was a tragedy in bronze armor, a place that silenced the soul to strengthen the shield, a culture that traded music for marching, curiosity for obedience, comfort for control. You've lived it. You know the truth isn't neat. You were never taught how to grieve, but you learned how to endure. You were never told how to love, but you found it anyway, in nods, in shared silences, in hands that held firm when words were forbidden. You weren't raised to be happy. You were raised to be useful, to be strong, to be remembered. And now, as your days grow slower, your steps less sharp, you wonder what kind of strength that really was. Not a strength of muscle anymore, a strength of memory, of having survived something most never understood. You sit beneath the same trees where the young still train. You watch, you listen, you do not speak, because now, in peace, you finally can. You've reached the end, not of life, though it may feel that way, but of the long, narrow corridor that began when you were just 7 years old and the state took you from your mother's arms. You've walked every step, from the hunger, the cold, the chance, the blood, the silence. You've made it through the agoge, the cryptia, the barracks, the battlefield, the bench beneath the olive trees. You've seen boys turn into weapons, seen friends vanish without fanfare, seen discipline become identity. And now, with aching knees and a voice that speaks less but says more, you ask the question that no one dares to say out loud. Was it all worth it? Historians still argue. They always will. Some say Sparta was a miracle of social engineering, a society that forged unity, efficiency, and bravery at levels unmatched in the ancient world. Others say it was a tragedy in bronze armor, a place that silenced the soul to strengthen the shield, a culture that traded music for marching, curiosity for obedience, comfort for control. You've lived it. You know the truth isn't neat. You were never taught how to grieve, but you learned how to endure. You were never told how to love, but you found it anyway, in nods, in shared silences, in hands that held firm when words were forbidden. You weren't raised to be happy. You were raised to be useful, to be strong, to be remembered. And now, As your days grow slower, your steps less sharp, you wonder what kind of strength that really was. Not a strength of muscle anymore, a strength of memory, of having survived something most never understood. You sit beneath the same trees where the young still train. You watch, you listen, you do not speak, because now, in peace, you finally can. And in this stillness, with the sun dipping behind the stone hills of Laconia, you feel something rare. Not victory, not pride, just ease. The kind of peace that doesn't need proving. The kind that comes only after you've walked through fire and made it out whole, or at least whole enough. You breathe slowly, deeply, the way you were taught to. The way that kept you calm in storms and shadows. One breath, then another. Let the city carry on. Let the chants rise and fade. You've done your part. Now, close your eyes. Let sleep take you. You are home.